on a low budget. Hey everybody, welcome back to Vinyl Fetish for another episode where we are counting through the 100 albums that should be in a true record collector's collection, according to me. We're going back to the world of live albums. Live albums, especially double live albums, were such a feature in the 1970s. There is a thing that happens. I don't know if it was by design or it just happened organically. I think it really starts in 1975 with Kiss Alive. Kiss Alive was the album that broke that band, that had their first really big hit, Rock and Roll All Night. It was an album that I cherished. Not the first double live album that I had. The first double live album I had was Elvis Aloha from Hawaii from 1973, I think. Kiss Alive, though, was massive. And then followed up the next year, in 1976, by Frampton Comes Alive, which many people would argue is the biggest live album, at least in the rock world, of all time. It really broke Peter Frampton's career. He went from playing small places to playing stadiums and, became the legend that he's become because of that fantastic live album. I mean, we used to meet over at my friend Mike Hinton's house. He had the one copy of it in the neighborhood. And I remember listening to Do You Feel Like We Do for the first time and thinking, how is Peter Frampton making his guitar talk? Because I didn't know about the talk box. And so the second half of the 70s, there's an explosion of sort of double gonzo live albums. It just becomes kind of the thing. And so we're going to talk about an album that sort of peaks off that era, that's really significant for the artist's career and for the double live career, because in the 80s, the double live album sort of peters out. So what we're talking about today, 1980, the Kinks live, You Get What You Play For. Wait, that was the REO Speedwagon album. That was the REO Speedwagon double live. One More for the Road. There's too many double live albums during this period. One More for the Road, recorded on the Low Budget tour in 79 and comes out in June 1980. Recorded in Switzerland, in college towns in the United States, and was really the next phase of the Kinks' career. So if you're a fan of the Kinks, you know that kind of in the 60s, many people think they kind of invent the heavy metal sound. Dave Davies really distorted guitar. And then in the early 70s, they go into a big period of concept albums, which are all brilliant. There's so many great songs on those albums. And then in the second half of the 70s, because album sales were kind of dropping, they move into what has been known as their arena rock phase. Albums like Misfits and Low Budget. In fact, Low Budget had a relatively big hit. It wasn't very popular in England. I mean, none of the Kinks albums have actually done very well in England. They've always done better in the United States. But it had a song that was kind of a Kinks disco song called Superman. Superman, I wish I could fly like Superman. But a lot of the songs on the Low Budget album are very topical, dealing with inflation and the declining status of the United States. And it was a kind of a topical album, but it was regularly played on rock radio in 1979. So in 1980, they released this sort of live document of that tour, and it is significant. It has been described as both, sort of a masterpiece, but also the reason that there should never be another double live album again. It was kind of loved and hated when it came out. I saw this tour. I saw it at the Fox Theater. John Mellencamp opened when he was John Cougar. Just a little story about that show. I was senior in high school, so this is maybe late summer 1980, and I had a crush on a girl named Robin Jett, who is like the coolest rock girl in my high school, Redan High School. And so I was the kid that always camped out for the concert tickets. So I had front row center tickets for the Kinks at the Fox Theater, front row center. Took pictures of the show, got a really great picture of John Mellencamp. During the show, Dave Davies, Ray's brother, who's playing guitar, came and leaned over and kissed Robin because she was so attractive, 16 years old at the time. And then after the show, a bouncer came out, or a roadie came out and whispered something in Robin's ear and said, something to her, and she said, "Hey, Randy, do you mind if I go hang out with the band after the show?" My date, my dream date. And I remember thinking at the time, well, if we were saying Blondie and somebody said, "Randy, do you want to go hang out with Debbie Harry backstage?" I would probably have bitched my date too. So I was like, go have a good time. And in fact, she ended up hooking up with John Cougar that night, hanging out with John Cougar. And the less that's said about that, the better. Anyway, back to the album. The album, besides the traumatic connection I have to it because I lost Robin to it, is that it is really kind of a great moment in rock history. Because what's happening is there's sort of this rediscovery of the Kinks. So Van Halen, their debut album, they do "You Really Got Me," "You Really Got Me" is on here. The Kinks, who had the Knack, who had a big kind of Brit rock pop with My Sharona, the biggest hit of 1979, did the Kinks song "The Hard Way." "The Hard Way" is on here. The Jam, the greatest mod band since The Who, did a Kinks song called "David Watts." David Watts is on here. What's not on here is "Superman," the big hit from their previous album. A couple of the other songs from Low Budget, including the title track and "Catch Me Now I'm Fallen," are on here. Some of the 60s highlights from the Kinks' career are on here. The spotlight of this is the reimagination of Lola. The Lola as a sing-along, Lola as a story, Lola as the first kind of pro-transgender song that's out there. Lola takes on a whole new arena rock life with this album, and it really brought that song back to the public and made it kind of a staple on radio again. And as someone who wants to, stand up for trans rights, the fact that song, especially in the South where I grew up, was kind of on the radio on a regular basis when this record came out, makes me happy. So the follow-up to this album, this was a great lineup. I mean, they brought on Jim Rodford from the Zombies on bass, who really sort of completed the late Kinks era. Mick Avery is back, and the follow-up, Give the People What They Want, was a great rock album. And then after that, in 1983, of course, their single "Come Dancing" comes out right as MTV is happening, and now I don't know if it's the third or the fourth, phase of the Kinks, but now we've got the Kinks, kind of the MTV version of the Kinks, and "Come Dancing" was huge. And continues sort of their career as then they sort of peter out in the late 1980s. There is infinite rumors that Ray and Dave Davies are working on something that's going to be called the Kinks. We keep hearing that there's bits and pieces of an album that's being made, and maybe someday we'll see it. I mean, I had the great fortune of running into Dave Davies in London in 1982 when I was a student there. I was 18 years old, and I was coming out of a laundromat in West London, and he was walking down the street and almost ran into him. And I said, "You're Ray Davies." And he said, "No, I'm not, you are." And I was so confused. And then he walked away, and that was my encounter with Ray Davies. But the sound on this album is really great. And like a lot of albums, live albums from the 70s, including Wings Over America and Kiss Alive 2 and Cheap Trick Live at Budokan and all these sort of great live albums that were coming out at the time, there's a lot of overdubbing. I mean, one of the best tracks on this album is Celluloid Heroes. And it's brilliant, and all the keyboard stuff was added later, which is like the highlight of the song. So, how live these albums are, how well they capture an actual concert. There's always smoke and mirrors. I mean, the Doors Absolutely Live, it's got like 10,000 edits in it from different performances. So we're not getting a absolute picture of a concert. We're getting a recreation, a reproduction of a concert, but it really captures the energy and the snark and the kind of cleverness, but also the punkness of this band that invented heavy metal, and they invented punk in a way too. I mean, they do the Prince of the Punks on this album, which was the B-side of the Christmas single they had out in the 70s. I mean, there really is this notion that this band is the band that's capturing multiple genres. A really great live album. Often in the discussion of live albums, I think this album gets left out. Everybody wants to talk about Frampton Comes Alive or Cheap Trick Live at Budokan, but this is a really great sort of the end of an era. Summer of 1980, the end of the era of the great double live albums of the 1970s. I highly recommend it. It is punk, it is metal, it is Britpop before Blur, and we just hope and pray that we'll get at least one more Kinks record before these two great brothers leave us for another world. And Dave, I forgive you for kissing Robin. John Mellencamp, I don't forgive you. You got some splaining to do. Okay, wanted to do this one. We'll do some more. Next on our 100 count through, we're going to talk about, everybody's talking about Beyonce. Beyonce is back, and Cowboy Carter, one of the best albums in a long time, is out. But we need to talk about Beyonce's sister, Solange. We're going to talk about Solange next time on Vinyl Fetish, so stay tuned for that. If you like all this chat, subscribe and like and all that good stuff. Tell your friends and tell your enemies. But the Kinks matter. This album matters. This music matters. You matter. So let's talk about it.